Hello everybody and welcome to the very first Color Theory in Oils episode. We're going to try a series of these things and hopefully they give you maybe either better understanding of the oils or just some ideas about the oils. This one is going to be as advertised, all about reds here. And we're going to try and run the gamut from warmer reds like this, also that are more opaque, all the way over here to, well, a reddish color that is about as translucent as you can get. So we're going from opaque, and then over to translucent over here. We also want to see what happens when we blend these with some, I think these are the colors you're going to use probably most with them, something like the white or the brilliant yellow pale. And there are many versions of these. Now I'm going to use the Williamsburg. This is essentially the, I call it the faux cadmium yellow light. I don't have any actual cadmium yellows. I've only got the, like here, the faux cadmium yellow pale, which is essentially what this is right here. Now it's older, it's a little bit more dried out, and I think this will be just easier. Plus we get to see these two working together. This is the permanent yellow deep that you've seen in so many of the Twitch sessions, and then I just thought this could be interesting where you see the effect that something like this has. And if you remember on one of the mixing oils episodes, we did a few of these. These were just two different brands. Here we're going to be using at least 3 different brands. I do believe Gamlin, Williamsburg, and the Winsor Newtons. We'll try and get the names on here. We'll try and get this designation of opaque, semi-translucent, translucent. But instead of just white, where you see the second column here, I want to try one of each of these columns, but with white, the cadmium yellow light, the cadmium yellow deep, and what was the third one? Well, the brilliant yellow pale, and then the last one would be mixing with this phthalo green. There are other ones coming up. I think the next one, to keep it simple, will be more towards blues and purples. Then we're going to start to get a little bit more complicated because I don't have a bunch of greens, and there's a reason for that, because what is green but yellow-blue? So that's going to be more of a mixing some of those blues and these yellows together. We also have all the browns that we need to cover. So this is going to be about a little bit of everything. Opacity, see that there's that pearline red right there, and we listed that as a translucent, but we see how it was affected by the white. So we've got ourselves, and geez, I'm going to have to get some more of these because this project is going to, I do believe, use up almost all of these. Now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 slots here. The idea is to get these as close as possible so that you can really see the impact. What I'm gonna, the plan is I'll put a dot of color here and a dot of the white or the yellow or whatever over here, and I'll just start pushing them. I'll have one brush for either thing, and we're just gonna push them towards the middle. And then I want to see, obviously this is the area that we want to see, because here we know what's going to happen, here we pretty much know what's going to happen, but in that middle area we want to see what's going to happen there. And we've got, I do believe, 7 of these all set up, and I wanted to leave myself a little room for a title on here to say which color is which, because forgetting, well, you could probably tell on some of these, but some of, like these two, this is actual cadmium red deep here. This is the real McCoy. Boy, that weighs a ton. So that is the real McCoy. This is the faux cadmium red. We want to see, what is the difference? And we're going to find out. So again, I got myself a whole bunch of brushes here. You can see some of these are really beat up, but I cleaned them with this right here, and it's for dried acrylic and for oil. It's not hazardous, no vapor, none of that, and it doesn't really cost a whole bunch either. So heck, I'm gonna probably get myself a couple more containers of that. So we got our boards ready here. I just want to see, do these fit? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It doesn't matter, they don't have to all fit on here at the same time. Anyway, I can also, well, I don't want to get any closer here. It's as far backed out as I can be. So what I'm going to probably do is move the camera up just a little bit so we can get all of these boards in here. And we're going to be right back with that. Our first color is going to be Fanchon Red, and we'll just write that here. And this is going to be a Williamsburg color, which also happens to be pretty darn opaque. We'll just write that over here too. So Fanchon Red, and what I'm just going to do is actually take just a dot of this here from the tube instead of from my pre-mixed things here. So I'm just going to cut a couple dots here. We'll see if this is too much. This board is somewhat absorbent as well. So we've got our 5 spots here, and we're going to just throw a bit of our titanium white over here. Now we're also going to employ some more of our thinner here. Now you can't see where this is, it's off camera. Got ourselves some brushes here, and we have ourselves a little bit of a rag to wipe some of this stuff. And we're just going to get enough of our thinner here just to get this flowing, just to get that moving. And you can see the difference. I also wanted to see, because you've seen me painting with the oils using the pre-thin stuff, but now not pre-thin, so I don't even need really that much. This is less absorbent than the other board that we used. And again, the idea is just get this stuff moved off to the side here just a bit. A bit more here. So yeah, just kind of keep in mind that this is a more absorbent surface. Okay. Just get it to about there. So yeah, probably could have used a wee bit less of the of the white there, but is what it is. So there is your titanium white. We might just give that a little bit of center to help it move around. And we'll get this brush out of the way here. And now we're going to take away some of the paint from this brush here. We're going to start to mix this. And that's going to be a very, you can see just how pale that is in comparison. It looks all warm over here, but boy, you get that titanium white in here. We're not looking for perfect blends here either. That's also not really the goal. So let's throw a little bit more of our white out here. Wipe some of the paint off of this. And now our real blending is going to begin here. So that maintains that opacity pretty much the entire distance. I'm going to find myself another brush here potentially for some blending, just a clean one. Use my finger in there too. So you can see where we got kind of that halfway point there. So at this stage now, you've kind of got yourself a little de facto Fanchon red with white, sort of a little swatch right there. You can see what it's going to do when mixed with the Fanchon red. So again, going from, and it's almost like the white of the board. You can really see that that is pretty distinctive, I would say. Now, I'm just going to find myself a good place to put some of these brushes here, keep those aside. Now, let's do our brilliant yellow pale, and you've seen that often enough. Again, try not to use a ton of it here. I would like these to dry. Now, of course, they're on this absorbent board with no primer or anything like that, so they should dry much more rapidly. Actually, some of this stuff is, I'm sure it's already drying. So a little touch of something here just to get this flowing. A bit more. That's actually kind of the other reason why I just took it right out of the jar, because there's too much of the thinner in there. It would dry out that much faster. So you can see we've extended this out here now. And we're going to clean up our brush here. It's another reason why I decided to just kind of go with a whole bunch of reds, because, well, they're similar enough to each other. So we get back into a little bit of that thinner, get this thing moving here. Look at the difference there. Yes, it looks like pink, but that is definitely distinctively different. I'm going to, again, do a little thing with a blending brush here. Just making sure it's going to have some of the liquid in it, but at least it doesn't have any of the paint in it. And you can see that yellow, that's why I kind of like this for some skin tones here. Because it does, now of course I would probably usually add some kind of yellow ochre to this. You can recognize that scumbling action there. So we've got ourselves a wee bit of a blend. This is also just a kind of a way to practice some of your blending here and mixing. It's just, I know it's maybe an involved process or something like that, but you want to learn the oils and such and learn how to blend things. Well, that is another way to do it too. And you can distinctly see a little bit of a change that happens here in the middle of this pink range. Just going to get myself a little bit more of that yellow out here. And then just a little bit more of our mix here. So that's fun. We're going to move on now to some permanent yellow light. That is the Williamsburg, and I think you can see the intensity of it here. Sweep that right along. Back to some of our Fanchon red over here. Just a little touch of our thinner here to make it, put it in motion. Dry out this brush a bit, and now let's start to do some mixing. And that should reveal a nice intense orange here. Especially in this sort of 50-50 range. Get it closer to our yellow here. Just a little touch of our thinner. Again, we're just looking to have that move. You can see how that's, look at that's kind of neat, right? Especially if you can do something like this actually and just put some board over the top of it. And what that'll do is just kind of hide the 200% colors. Speaking of another color, this is going to get interesting now as we're getting into the deep end here. Get a little of that cadmium yellow deep. A new brush. Do it again. I mean, look at how, this is why it's cadmium yellow deep, well, permanent yellow deep, or whatever the construct is, that the name for it. Okay. And we're going to mix this way. A little bit thinner to get that in motion. And now we're into our mixing zone here. We'll dry this out, as much of the paint out of there as we can. And look at the intensity of this orange here. Now, the one color I didn't throw out here was the cadmium red scarlet. That might just be in a separate little thing. There were some reasons for that. I was trying to actually find some other brands and some reds that were vastly different here, or some that actually just kind of were very similar. I think it'll maybe be clear after I make all of these. Now, here's our phthalo green. Let's get another brush. Get enough thinner in her to get this moving around. And I'm curious to see what sort of a brown do we get out of this. That's red and green are going to make usually a brown. So let's see what kind of a brown we get from this. Fanchon red, loosen up a bit here. Sweep it across towards the middle. You can see how one is opaque and this one is not. It's pretty clear straight away. And now the fun begins here. And see how it actually going to get darker here in the middle and more opaque. And then as we get over here, it's almost turning like a, I don't want to say a purple-ish color. I'm going to keep wiping this brush off here. Kind of using that same scumbling motion that you've seen before. So there you go. We mixed 4 opaques with an opaque. Then we mixed this translucent color with an opaque. So Our starting point here is an opaque, and that is your Williamsburg Fanchon Red. And I do believe our next color that we're going to move on to is going to be this Perline Red, which I haven't actually used except for making a swatch with it. So that's going to be really interesting, and we're going to get to that next. Next up is our Gamlin Perline Red, obviously much darker than the Fanchon Red. We'll throw out our titanium white over here, and we'll just start the process again here. Move this across, and you can already see the translucency of that. Very different from our Fanchon Red, is it not? That is really different. This should make a very interesting pink right here. I'm also curious to see what happens when it mixes with our faux cadmium yellows. Should create a pretty intense color with this, again, being more translucent. Now somewhere we have our, here it is. I knew I had a titanium white brush still sitting over here. Sweep our titanium white across. Some of that in the middle. Again, just gonna clean this off. And let's get down to some mixing here. Very curious to see what's gonna happen. Not quite as, yeah, see, not such a warm pink. I think this already kind of qualifies as a cooler red. We're always talking about the temperature of a color. Reading the temperature of a color. Let's get as much of the paint out of this as we can. Same kind of scumbling motion that we would use on miniatures here. Let's compare this. Look at the difference there. You can already see. Yeah, it's a little bit darker, but this is more translucent, and you can see the comparison there of those two. So this is warmer, but it's cooler in the middle than this is. How crazy is that? You think, oh, okay, yeah, this one's going to be more of a warm pink here. Nope, this is actually more of a warmer pink, because the luminosity of this, as transparent as this is, it's also not quite as intense. So interesting result there. Let's try our brilliant yellow pale. And like I said, there's several other brands that have colors that are like this. It's lemon yellow is one that always keeps coming to mind. Oh, is this the, no, that's the cadmium yellow light. I'm just going to grab a different one here for our yellow, our brilliant yellow pale. A little touch of our thinner here. Again, another opaque color. You can really tell the opacity of that. Good enough. Let's get to moving our Perline Red dot. All right. Away we go. This is going to be fun. Looking forward to seeing this. I'm already going to get some of this paint out of this brush, and just to have a bunch of rags handy for doing this, because you're going to want to just wipe these brushes off, as in very, very frequently. You can see I use kind of a diagonal motion here. Then back to sort of scumbling, back to more of a diagonal motion here. And wipe this brush out as much as I can. There's your yellow, your brilliant yellow pale mixed with your perline red. Now it almost looks more a little bit more like the fanchon red in the middle there, because this provided the warmth and it provided the opacity that sort of is what you've got already in the fanchon red. What's our next thing here is going to be our cadmium yellow pale. Which looks like this brush right here. I think you can see how this works. We have one brush for each of these colors because we're not mixing with this brush. So yes, we'll put these off to the side here. Clean out. The handy part is that the brush that we're moving from the red in here, it doesn't matter if we actually got some of our thinner in that, because it's just going to help it move. Normally, when we're working on the miniatures, we don't want to have a whole bunch of thinner in that brush because it's just going to wipe away the paint. But this board is really absorbent. And it just starts to mix with our yellow. We start to get a very interesting kind of a reddish orange already starting to happen here. Yeah, these boards, I'm going to get fingerprints on them. I'll get a little bit sort of stained or whatever. I apologize for that. I can't take the time to do all the cleaning maybe that I would like to be able to do. This would be a really long video otherwise, and I don't think you need it to be super long. I think you'll kind of get the idea of what's happening here. It's kind of the final result, because I'm thinking maybe these could be some interesting little color charts that we use along the way on videos, where I just kind of say, okay, this is the color. Here's the physical color. This is what it sort of looks like here mixed on a swatch compared to this. Maybe go into the rationale of why this instead of this on a miniature. So these are as much of a future reference guide as they are the actual lesson right now. So, boy, this already makes that your brilliant yellow pale look quite pale. Next up, cadmium yellow deep. Same brush. These are all the number 8 round craft brushes, by the way. I know there's different color handles. The handles change. The brush remains the same. Speaking of the same brush, let's clean this one out here. And wipe that off with a rag. This should create something very intense as well. Probably not like the Fanchon Red. And again, we've got an opaque mixing into a translucent. The last one where we do the phthalo green, that's where we're going to have a translucent into a translucent. So you might have, see how it's not quite covering here? You probably have that the entire length of that last bar that we are going to mix. Mixing this with our, I keep wanting to call it orange because it's already looking so orange. Very different. Interesting. Let's see how that compares to our fanchon. So the biggest difference is that opaque into opaque, we have just a more of a solid blend. Here, less of a solid blend. The color doesn't look all that different. It's just the blend is more, it's got holes in it. I know that's kind of a weird description of it, but it's sort of like it has some holes in it. Time for a phthalo green, which this ought to be interesting. That ought to be very interesting. Two transparents, darker transparents mixing together. What will the result be? I have an idea, but having an idea and actually seeing it are two different things. Let's take a red, move this across. One last mix here. That's, wow. That didn't take very much. Oh my goodness. Wow, that happened fast. So a little phthalo green goes a long way, doesn't it? That's why I wanted you to see this. You have to actually see this in person. Man. Boom. Look at that. That's crazy. I'm gonna throw out just a touch more of this here. That was most unexpected. And I gotta really clean off this brush here because that was kind of hilarious. I mean, it's just, I can only get a couple of brush strokes there before that whole color changes so completely. You say phthalo green doesn't cover, but look at the impact that it has. Look at this. I mean, immediately, as soon as it hit that red, it was like, it went from 0 to 200 in a second. That surprised even me. All right, that takes care of our Perlene red. Wow, okay. Again, that's not unheard of, but to just again see it happen. Look at you see how this is here that kind of is an orangey look. It's almost like a Terra Rosa in there, while sort of a very greenish Terra Rosa. This, two very different greens there. This in the middle here, yeah, really different than this. This almost has kind of a violet look to it, whereas that has sort of a reddish brown-ish kind of a look. So, Fanchon red, Perlene red. Next up is going to be our cadmium red deep from Gamlin. This should be interesting too, and we're going to get to this next. Next up, we've got our genuine cadmium red deep. Again, this is from Gamlin. Now, I mean, this tube weighs a ton, and it weighs a ton because there's actual cadmium in there. I show that because, or I talk about that because for me it's not a big deal because you're using such small amounts of it. Other people get kind of, they hear the cadmium thing and it just makes them very concerned. So I always try to say this is the genuine item. For me, I'm not so worried about that aspect of it. It's just the fact that this is going to cost more than an entire starter set, which is why we are comparing this one to that. And I do believe, I don't know if, I don't remember if that's the next one. I had a whole schedule planned out here. That could be the next one. And the idea is it just will let you know, is there a significant difference between the real thing and as what we just referred to as our faux cadmium. So we've done that. It's time now to get this brush cleaned out here. Got ourselves some new paper towels because we're going to go through these more than obviously we would on a miniature. We're using more paint, so it kind of makes sense. And I can already see a couple of interesting things. Now this is, first of all, it's opaque. You can see the opacity of that. Another interesting aspect of this is that it really, I mean, it's a deep red. This, I don't want to say it looks dingy, but in comparison to the first two reds that we used, big difference here. When this hits the blue over, or the, not the blue, our titanium white should make an interesting combination here. I don't think it's going to be, well, I'll just show you real quick here. So here's our perline red. You can already see that's got much more of a bluishness to it. I can see it right off the bat here. And as this combines with the white, like I said, the nearest comparison I can make to it is it's almost kind of on the dingy side. That's an interesting, this is really, I think this is just the most different center range that we've had so far. I'm just gonna take a little touch of, and you can see, look how many times have I had to reach for some sort of thinner to make the middle flow. That does not really happen much. So again, another difference between your cadmium red there, that opaque. So pretty interesting there. Touch of my thinner over into this, and I just want to make this white flow a little bit more into our red. Again, keeping those paint rags handy. Interesting. Looks so different from those. Even the perline red is a way warmer red than this. Let's go all the way over back to the fanchon. Huh? See our difference right there? It's not just darker red. There's opacity differences. You'll hear me say it over and over again. It might be a little bit boring or whatever, but I think it's something that needs to be heard for sure. That might have been a little bit too much of our yellow, so I'm going to take away some of that. And actually I've got a palette nearby here, so I'm just going to store it over there, and we'll just keep it for the next one. Because I don't think we need quite that much. Something like well, you could, well, plastic card's a little bit on the expensive side. I tried to get I think, well, this is hot press illustration board, I do believe, so. All right, put this brush off to the side. Let's get a brush here for our cadmium red. Our cadmium red deep. And we'll set this in motion here. Also, just going to throw a little thinner on there to keep those more active. And then let's see what happens when we start moving this around. I'm not sure if this is going to be more... It's really going to be all that different. So not terribly different straight away than the white. I think as it gets over to here, probably will start to change. Yeah, it does get kind of dingy. It's actually getting... I know it's a weird term, but it kind of looks a little dingy by comparison. If you're asking, well, okay, what would you mostly use, well, the cadmium red deep for? It's something that I would mix with indigos. It's something that I would mix with, say, that violet. I would be mixing with other colors, maybe not lighter colors, but with other darker colors to make really opaque. Remember, this is opaque. So it's one way to, if you mix it with, say, phthalo green, phthalo blue, whatever, maybe even the Egyptian violet, those become really opaque and dark. So if you're saying, well, okay, what what would you do with this? No, okay, we did the wrong color there. I'm gonna see if I can. No, we'll just go with this. We kind of switched our colors around here. It's all right, whatever. I went to reach for the brush and I went, that's not the right brush for that. So it might be interesting to see this anyways. So this is our faux. That's really a difference from the... Wow, look at that. Clean this one as best as we can. And move our cadmium red deep into our faux cadmium yellow deep. And then we'll have these meet in the middle. And maybe this is where things get a little bit interesting. Because here, that's really not what I would probably be doing with my cadmium red. This is more like what I'd be doing with it. Taking those darker reds, like maybe the more alizarin crimson style red, and mix it with that just to get some opacity in it. Not necessarily that could be it. Just looking for some opacity. It would maybe take away some of the, I don't know, some of the juiciness of that alizarin crimson, but your alizarin crimson would also cover this. This is potentially something maybe as a middle tone on your blood angels or whatever. Thinking of that. Now we got some flow here. And that doesn't surprise me with, well, two relatively opaque colors, that we had to kind of give him a bit of an assist with some of our thinner there to make it flow. All right, now let's use the right one that was supposed to go here. This is going to be our cadmium yellow light, faux cadmium yellow light. I think I have the correct brush now. Yeah, and I apologize for that. That wasn't really supposed to happen, but I think the idea is still going to come across. I was hoping for something that would directly compare from one little chart to the next, but it is what it is. This might also be, well, not might, I'm sure it's going to be less of an intensity than, say, the Fanchon Red when these two mix together. Let the mixing begin. Wow. Yeah. I'm fascinated at how, when the yellow hits this, like I said, I wasn't expecting this to glow like the sun, but far different result from what I expected. It's kind of turning almost a brownish color here. It's like some kind of strange brownish red. Wow. Yeah. Huh. That almost, gosh, it's starting to look almost more like a, I don't want to say a sienna color, but I don't want to say, yeah, burnt sienna is a little bit more intense than this, but I'm really fascinated. I guess, if I kind of analyze what the pigments are that go into something like a cadmium red deep, and we can actually do that here. Pigments are pigment red 108, and it's just linfield. Oh, and see, it even says opaque right there on the container. Sadly, these smaller ones in the set here don't quite say that. What's our pigment on this one? See, there's two pigments on here. There's pigment red 170 and pigment orange 36. Last color, phthalo green. Wow. Okay, this should be, my assumption is that this will be even much darker than all the other stuff that went before. Phthalo green. And then time for a red. And we'll mix these together. And I have no idea how much different this is going to be from what we've done with already the Perline and Fanchon Reds. I'm expecting the opacity of this might almost look black compared to those other ones that just, you could see a distinctive, like one was more of a brown, one almost had a violet look to this. This just might look like, now Van Dyke Brown is too, that wouldn't be the, wow, okay. Just, wow, a little bit of that phthalo green hit it here. Man. Okay, it's that phthalo green is just, it's got some kick to it. That has some serious kick. I had to keep wiping this brush off to try and keep the green from overpowering the red everywhere here. Might even have to just get a little more of my, I'm just going to take some of my thinner here, grab some of my cadmium red, and we'll just start moving it this way. But boy, it doesn't take much of the green to change that. So you think cadmium, right? Cadmium colors. The whole reason you get them super opaque, super intense, and well, along comes the phthalo green that punches it right in the face. Compare it to our, wow. Okay, yeah. I think even on screen that shows up just how much different that is. So an interesting result right there. Interesting difference between this and our two colors that have already come before this. And next up is going to be, sure enough, it's going to be our faux cadmium red deep hue. And we'll get back to that in just a second. Next up is our cadmium red deep hue. This is from Winsor Newton. And now that's a 4-year-old container there. You can, this is more of an updated set. So this was gotten much more recently, just a few months ago. And when I see other people with the Winton sets, they look more like this. So that was just, obviously that's a much older set right there. And boy, that's, I don't want to say it's dried out, but boy, that's looking a little peckish right there. So we're mixing this with our titanium white as we've done before. And this is another reason why the cadmium red scarlet wasn't in there, because we kind of know what that can do. I would prefer to maybe even show you that with some genuine cadmium yellows if I can. Again, those are on the expensive side, so I can't be getting a whole bunch of those all at once, and I'm not sure you're gonna need any or all of those either. Already seeing a big, wow, okay. This is massively different from the cadmium red deep that I just saw. This is, it's almost like an opaque version of that perline red. So big difference right or straight away, just in the color of cadmium red itself. Where's my, here it is. Wow, that's a big difference there. This is more like a Fanchon red. This is what I mean. You can what did we see in here? We saw orange, right? That pigment orange 36 or whatever. We're seeing the orange in here. Wow, are we ever seeing the orange in that? And sure enough, this is gonna look different too. Yeah. Wow, that is nothing like the other cadmium red deep. They are too, well, I know to some folks is, what do you mean? These are massively different, these two colors. I'm a little surprised at how the white is mixing with this. I kind of was expecting, because of having the yellow that orange pigment in there, that it would make more of a difference when being mixed with the white over here, but that does not really seem to be the case. Now maybe, okay, the more of the closer we get to the 100% cadmium red, it's starting to make a difference. Well, I'll be doggone, look at that. It's reminding me of Fanchon red. Of course, that tube of Fanchon red is also several times more expensive than this tube, because that starter set costs a whole bunch more than this starter set. We move along here, and this time we'll get it right. We're going to get our brilliant yellow pale. Started on its path off towards the cadmium red deep. Well, faux cadmium red. Well, this is really putting the faux in cadmium red here. That's for sure. Do a little quick clean on our brush here. Now again, that there is an advantage to this in that there's no cadmium in this, so you don't have to worry if you're worried about getting it on your skin. This really not a big deal. It's just another oil paint. Obviously, the cost of it significantly less too. The standard, that 37 mil tube, that's going to generally, if it's some kind of cadmium, is going to or cobalt, is going to cost you more than an entire starter set like this one. I was expecting a little bit more of an impact from our brilliant yellow pale on the cadmium red here, but can't constantly have to wipe this off. Well, that's mostly going to get covered, fortunately, by our next swatch. So much more like the see the perline red, slightly warmer there. These aren't huge differences here. These are kind of minuscule. Even if you were looking at them if you're not used to having to spot those things, you really probably wouldn't even notice. For me, geez, even when I was working at a computer graphics studio, we had to spot percentage point differences in saturation and in colors. We had to be able to say, yeah, let's do a 0.5% change on this, so let's do a 1.5% change on this. Time for our, let's head the other direction with this now. It's really tough to keep these charts all clean and tidy. You could, I guess, tape off the areas. However, the tape might tear off some of your paint. Now this, interesting here. So I like this way better. So the cadmium red deep that we mixed into the faux cadmium yellow deep, as far as the real thing goes, I wasn't super thrilled with that. This I like a lot better. I like this much better. So it's not like the super expensive stuff is always ideal. I mean, it could be it could be better, yes, but is it always perfect? Not necessarily. Not always. All right, so that intrigues me. Is this my yeah. Yeah, so here it just kind of looked dingy. It looked almost like a brown there. Didn't like that. This, liking it way more. Oh, you know what? So we did do that wrong again, which is fine because now it's just as well because now actually maybe I was supposed to do that. Let's see if look how dingy that. I mean, that just looks like well, it's not a bad color or anything like that. It just as I see what's happening here with our faux cadmium red, I guess that's where the orange is starting to creep through. That orange pigment, that orange 36 or whatever. Okay, got the right brush here. So cadmium yellow, faux cadmium yellow light. And to me, I think you've seen me using the Fanchon Red an awful lot lately, especially on the streams and such. Maybe it's just because I saw the Fanchon Red is taking the place of this, because it's doing an awful lot of the same things that the Fanchon Red would do. And we'll just start moving this over here towards our cadmium yellow light. Again, we're gonna we're gonna find some kind of a rag here. Get this as cleaned off as we can. Just gonna get a little tiny touch of that thinner, make this flow. All right, so it's not as bright as I thought it might be here, but still, in comparison to what we were seeing from the other cadmium red, mixing with this, well, the real cadmium red mixing with our cadmium yellow light here, still a little bit more intense, yeah. More saturated. Those things are almost interchangeable, those two expressions, when you hear me use those. Wow, okay, yeah, that is... Huh. Let's compare it again. Ah, definitely, yeah. Okay, interesting. Last color. Green. And this. And if I had to guess what this is going to be, like, I'm just going to guess more like what happened with our Fanchon Red. Maybe the Perline. Somehow we got some white into that, so we're gonna... It just kind of rolled over into my brush with the white. I do suspect that just like every other time we've done this, the phthalo green is going to really overpower that. So maybe I won't have that move over towards the red quite so far. Maybe we'll just minimize that a bit. And now the fun begins again. How much impact does that green have as soon as it hits this cadmium red? Immediate. Yep. A massive immediate impact. And it just, look at it, just darkens everything down. It takes next to nothing here. It really, really does. This time I'm gonna actually clean up the brush here, so it's a clean brush. We might even have a touch of our thinner on it. It sure does make that opaque. even where the thinner's been added. All right, there's your cadmium red deep hue. That's your Winsor Newton starter set color. Next up is going to be our permanent crimson. So essentially, to me, this is mostly a alizarin crimson right here. This is going to be our next color. We'll get to it. Next up is our Williamsburg permanent crimson, which I always referred to as titanium, or not titanium white. We're going to mix it with titanium white, but I always call it alizarin crimson. This should give us some, I don't know if it's, I don't know if you necessarily would call it pink, but it's going to give us something interesting when we mix it with this white here. And also keep in mind that this is a very translucent color. Just by its nature, it's going to be really translucent. I also have a feeling that just much like the phthalo green, the effect that had, where just a little bit of it had a big impact on the mix or the swatch. I think the same is going to happen here because it's one of those darker, more intense colors. And we're going to get right to it here. You can see how translucent it is already. It doesn't take much. It is dark. This is, I'm sure, the bluest of all the reds that we've used, and that's what I mean by a cooler red. And we've used this a couple of times on some miniatures already, and yep, that it also has a substantial impact. You can also see how it, you notice how I don't have to keep going back to say get some of my thinner. That's kind of the impact of the crimson right there, because in some ways the transparent colors will, like this, will flow a little bit better too. These are a lot of things that just don't factor in when you're using the acrylics, but they are going to factor in with the oils. This is another reason why, like with the mixing of the oils in the bottles, don't I don't suggest that you do that. I suggest you do it the old-fashioned way, the hard way, and just physically mix it. And the more people I talk to now, they say, "Yeah, I'm glad I did that." Or they say, "Well, I didn't do it the first time around, and things didn't work out so well, so I changed the approach the next time around." I'm gonna go back and get just a little bit of my titanium white here, since this has it's picked up some of that alizarin crimson there. And don't mind me, I need to be able to get the brushstroke going that way. So I'm gonna go back here. We're gonna get ourselves some of our titanium white, and it's probably just enough sitting here on the brush to do the job. Sure enough, there is. Now this one I have to make sure I have it cleaned. Otherwise, heck, I might even have to pick a whole another new brush here. That might not be quite clean enough, but we're just gonna throw some white here in another area just so I got it to work with. I really want that to be as clean of a white as we can get. All right, good enough. Time for our yellow, our permanent yellow light. Now this color, even though it's opaque, it flows really well. Now I don't know if that's got to do with the whole Williamsburg hand-mixed paints thing or whatever, but it really does flow across the our illustration board quite nicely here. Clean out the brush again. we begin our mix. I think I seem to remember using this mixture on a miniature too, mostly for that when I'm looking for some kind of a rosy look on the skin tones. And I think the shyish purple, if you're looking for a contrast paint equivalent, that's about the closest thing. I recognize that. I've seen that before. That's kind of a complete our mix here. And with this, since it seems like both colors are kind of having a big impact on each other, I'm gonna have to be cleaning that brush out quite a bit, I think. Yeah, not even enough to wipe that off. These two are really, these two colors pack a punch. Okay, I'm just going to use my finger there. Since this is not phthalo, or this is not alizarin crimson, this is also not cadmium red or anything like that. There's no cadmium yellows in this, so I don't mind using my fingers there. And I think we'll compare this to our Fanchon red. That's really going to show you, I think, in pretty stark terms, just what an impact this cooler color has, and also how opaque this has turned this. And it really does make it so much more opaque. Where's our Fanchon red here? So not just darker, but much cooler. I think that is why I'm trying to do the thing where I mix it with the white in the center column. That's the thing I'm most interested in, and for you to see as well, is that center column right in here, where kind of the influence of one and the other are both kind of the same. Now this time we are going to do our cadmium yellow light, our faux cadmium yellow light here, because I do believe I have the right brush for it. So I apologize on those two. The area is set up for painting miniatures, not for color swatches. That's for sure. That's one of the main lessons from today. Crimson doing its thing. Even now, wow, that's enough. The board was already starting to absorb some of that. I actually had to use some of my thinner here to get this to move. You can see the translucency of it over here. And now it's going to just about going to start doing its mixing thing. And that orange, yeah, we're getting something nice, interesting here. I'm sure I've mixed these two for stuff like golds, or even where I'm doing some object source lighting and I don't want it to be necessarily like our cadmium scarlet, or even the fluorescence. Just trying to get this crimson to go a little bit closer here to the edge of the yellows. Then we'll clean out our brush. And we'll move this way with it. All right. Time for our cadmium yellow deep. Now this one, it's almost like I'm like taking bets. What's it gonna look like? This one, I'm not so sure. Not quite so sure on this. Also, when they also make stuff like a cadmium orange deep, cadmium orange, there's like all these different cadmiums. And what I'm hoping here is that when you see stuff like this, especially when we do the greens, you say, you know what? I think I can save myself a few pennies here and maybe not maybe not have to have 10 different cadmiums. Maybe I can mix them. Maybe there's a way of using the stuff I possibly already have. Will it be the exact same thing, maybe? I have to say, look, when people are looking at, or let's say if it's just one figure, okay, but let's say it's your whole army, people are not really going to be able to tell, especially even if it's on your display board, they won't be able to tell minute differences from one guy to the next. Now, if it's blazingly different, like you used cadmium red deep in one area and this crimson on another figure, well, they'll spot that. I'm already starting to spot here. This is potentially a nice, well, again, potential cadmium orange or something like that. It looks nice and fiery here. That's a deep, rich, fiery orange. This is one of the most intense oranges that I've gotten so far as the on the deeper side of things. I think the Fanchon red was bound to, when it was mixed with the cadmium yellow, especially the cadmium yellow deep here. Yeah, where's our Fanchon red? Yeah, so it's interest. Yeah, that's about what I was thinking of. Man, that Fanchon red really is nice and bright. Well, this is not going to be nice and bright. This is going to be our phthalo green here. We essentially have opposite colors, red and green, but they're two very staining colors. If you've used these two in a pre-glaze situation, my goodness. Here we go. So as much impact as we've seen the phthalo green have when we push it this way, let's see what our essentially alizarin crimson is going to have going the opposite way. Again, just cleaning out this brush as best as I can. Trying to keep my fingers cleaner so that our little charts here don't get too messed up. This is where I'm anticipating almost somewhat of a violet look here. And see how translucent that is. And then it hits our phthalo green and immediately becomes not very red at all. That green is good. it overpowers, even the alizarin crimson overpowers that. Now when we get into this range here, it does almost have a bit of, I don't want to say necessarily a violet, sort of like if we did phthalo blue with this, then you'd have more of a violet type of appearance, but wow. Yep, so there you have permanent crimson from Williamsburg. Now we get into these sort of magenta style colors. So we're going to start off with purple madder, and then we'll go on to our quinacridone magenta. So another very translucent color, but this one a little bit different than our alizarin. We'll get to this one next. Time now for purple madder from Winsor Newton. This one's not going to be, it's almost like the cadmium red deep of alizarins here. I suspect obviously it's going to have that purple look to it, but also when these two meet in the middle, I don't think it's going to almost be like what, you remember the cadmium red deep? I kept using the word sort of dingy. That's what I'm going to expect more from here. Just I might be using, if you hear that word, that's, well, don't be too surprised. This is darker also than your alizarin, as you can see. And this is, gosh, it's almost going to look almost grayish by comparison. Almost a little bit on the grayish side. It's been a while since I've used this, mostly because, well, we had our Egyptian violet, so this went sort of, I don't want to say it went by the wayside, but I'm going to have to find some miniatures where we have this as a feature, I think. I forgot how much I like this. This could also be good for certain skin tones, not always just, okay, that's sort of Slanishi purple, whatever. But certainly in the family. All right, we'll say that's our white there, our white mix. I'm gonna clean that out as best as I can. And just say that's good enough. Next up is going to be our really light yellow here. And we did save some from a previous little chart here, so let's just use that. This might, because you are sort of taking a yellow and a purple, it might be even more grayish. You know, here we have sort of a violet color, but I have a feeling this could be a little bit more almost like it's dulling it down, whereas the white just sort of works a bit more with our purple matter here. And of course, I'm just gonna get a little bit more of this, make that a bit deeper. And actually that's having, oh, I don't want to say an opposite effect, but not quite what I was expecting. I thought you'd have a little bit of clash here with the yellow and that purple, but there's enough red in this, I think. In some ways, this actually brings out a bit more of the rosiness than the white did. Somehow I thought that the white might, well, it's more of a reddish color, I think, than I maybe remember. It's been a while, like I said, since we have featured this, so perhaps that is why. I also didn't have this yellow before. So last time I was using this color, I didn't really have this yellow either. So I think that might have a little something to do with it too. You can't mix something together that you don't have. All right, now as we move over to here, okay, then it does start to dingy it up. So in the middle, but this is the area we're looking at here, this middle third. This is the important one. It gets dingy over here or dingier, but that is I like the thing that's going on here better than over here. Now on to our cadmium yellow light. This I could anticipate being interesting for some gold here, for shading some gold. Will that bear itself out? Only one way to know. This is the only way to know, is to actually try it. I have to say, for folks that actually do play the games, Theory Hammer and all that kind of stuff, that was as useless to me as most analytics is in sports, because when you roll ones as often as I do, there's no theory that's going to save you from that, and you just have to play it out and do it instead of talking about, well, what should happen. And that's what we're going to do here. I'm thinking what might happen. Now we're going to find out what's actually going to happen as these two meet in the middle. Now this is more intense than a little more intense than I was expecting, but this is the kind of the color I was hoping for. That is what I was kind of hoping for to see. Yep. That's a pretty close to what I would have liked to have seen with these two mixing together. This to me is something that could work for getting some shading in your golds here. So purple matter. I do expect, my thought is that now as I get out the cadmium, well, the faux cadmium yellow deep, we almost start to have an amber sort of a color. So I did get, there's again a little maybe, but I don't like to necessarily use the word dingy, but I am going to go back in just a little bit of yellow in this. No, that wasn't just the fact that it was kind of dried out. No, that's just the two of them mixing together that way. That's what they do. Now for our, yep, that's my cadmium yellow deep brush. Right back to it. Okay. Back to our brush for blending. This again, another color that my first thought where this would go is for something like your golds to get some shadows in there. Or, no, I wouldn't say fiery object source, although that, see right here in the middle, that could be a decent, I don't want to say shadow color for your fiery glow type stuff, but maybe. So, liking what I'm seeing here. Liking what I see there. And we'll just do this. Remember too, the other reason why we're doing this here instead of just trying to like mix it on a palette somewhere is that your miniature, that's where you're mixing, right? So we have to kind of simulate this notion that we are mixing on a miniature. And now, our phthalo green. This purple matter is not going to be quite the staining color, not, well, nowhere near something like the Egyptian violet. I mean, not even close to that. Or, geez, even the indigo. But these two, this and indigo mixed together, you probably wouldn't even be able to see it on camera. It would just be a big black line. Heck, even to me in person, it would probably just look a lot like a really dark line. And we will now finish off this little purple matter color chart. Gosh, this is so dark. This is so dark. The other ones, at least you could really see where the one ends and the other begins. This could be tough for you to see. It's tough for me to see in person. I mean, I'm looking at this thing, no camera, nothing like that. It's not easy. Now, this is the first time I have not seen the phthalo green overwhelm the other color. Maybe it's the darkness of it, just purely the darkness of it. But this is the first time I've seen something different with the phthalo green. The quinacridone probably is going to go back to more what we've seen with the other colors. But this is the first time. It's not like the red overpowers the phthalo green, but it puts up a good fight. And that's incredibly dark. So that's that purple matter and the phthalo green, that's going to give you a nice healthy dark. One last color to go. Quinacridone magenta. We'll do that next. This is our last color to try out here, and I'm kind of curious to see what happens here. Now, this is another one of those, some of these colors, you see that we got the separation there. So it's been a long time since I used this. So long that I actually had kind of struggled to get the cap off. So it's just an indication there of just how long it's been since I last used that. Now, let's hit our titanium white and let's see what happens. This is another color that I've used a lot. I bet you I used it a lot on the Kara Kalila bust and probably haven't used it as much since. We can only, if we want to see what this is going to be like, we can just give it a shot here. Now, I'm just going to change it, my focus a little bit. There we go. I mean, it's not like this has to be in super hard focus. It's color swatches. Oh my. This could get bright. This could be a very intense bright pink when this hits it. Oh, wow. Wow. That's no lie. Wow. Just going to snag a little bit more of this over here. But what's interesting is that the white has a pretty serious effect on this pretty quickly. Yeah, that's interesting what the white does to it. Very. Again, it's sort of not quite so unexpected because this is like super translucent. There's translucent colors. This thing's super translucent. I mean, I can't use the ST label for it because that's semi-translucent, but or maybe UT, like ultra translucent. That is seriously translucent stuff right there. I can't overemphasize that point. Yeah, that's of all the colors here that have been mixing with, say, the white, this one really probably impacted the most so far. Let's go back to the beginning. Temperature difference there, wouldn't you say? Let's get to our off-white yellow here. That is our Williamsburg brilliant yellow hue. And now let's let's get this quinacridone magenta moving into our yellow. That is just so massively translucent there. That becomes yeah, okay. I'm really liking this. Actually liking this sort of pink even a little bit more. Another potential skin tone pink in here. Especially since it's got this sort of warmth to it that I see. So certainly potential there. I just kind of pre-planted some possible uses for this. As I see this color, I say, oh, okay, well, what would I really do with this? Sometimes you may not even know until the situation sort of pops up. But I think, at least I'm hoping that you see the value of doing this, not just to learn what happens, but we actually have it. We got like a color library now. So this might be something that I refer to more. Maybe I even kind of do a, oh, actually, uh, yeah, look at this. Look at that. Well, see, doing this color, you might be just you might be seeing more of this color again. Don't be surprised. Do not be surprised. So this is going to be our. I just want to. Oh, I almost grabbed the wrong one. So this is our cadmium yellow, our faux cadmium yellow light. Let's do it. Only one way to know. Do we try and anticipate what's going to happen here? This middle part, yeah, see, that's kind of neat, but that's sort of a cool. Well, actually, both of these are neat, but that one's really a nice rich pink in the center there, which sounds like something you would hear on a cooking show. In fact, it really does sound like a cooking show. Well, we're baking some new flavors here. We're trying to combine flavors. We are combining hopefully all new flavors for you here. Hopefully this makes it seem a little less mysterious to you. Well, less. I don't like to use the word scary, but just less mysterious. Maybe taking it away from the whole unknown, like, well, I'm not sure what's going to happen. And this is the moment I've been waiting for. I'm starting to see. Yeah, I'm liking this. This is about what I was hoping for. Yeah, it's in this all important kind of 50-50 zone over here. All important 50-50 zone, seeing what happens as we combine these two. I need to get some of this magenta out of the brush here. And let some of the cadmium yellow take over. Now get it. This was, if I was doing this, say on plastic card, and this is not dry, it's just, you could say it gets a little bit tougher to mix. Wow, that might even be too much. I just grabbed a little bit of thinner here. And I'm just going to actually use what's left of the yellow in this brush here to do the last little bits of blending in this zone. That's nice and flamey right there. So again, we've taken 3 opaque colors, combined it with something that is hyper translucent. I do believe I've got, yes, where are you? There you are. This should be interesting too. I'm not quite sure how much different it'll look from, say, the purple matter in this area. I think they look significantly different here. I anticipate that, but we'll see here. Let's get this brush cleaned out best as we can. Quinacridone magenta. Meet faux cadmium orange. And we shall see what the result is. It already gets really intense. This is why I'm saying I don't know. I just don't know if cadmium red, cadmium orange deep. If you want to really, do you need to get a color like that when you can make something that clearly is pretty intense like this? I just don't know if you need to spend that kind of money on that color. It's really the cost of it, because the whole point of the oils was there was a bit of economy of scale in these things. The idea that maybe you wouldn't have to spend so much on your paint. So this is another reason behind these little color swatches here. What can you do with stuff that's not necessarily the super expensive cadmium and cobalt? What can you do with those hues, the permanent hues, the permanent green hue, all the hues? So once again, liking this. So I think you're going to see that quinacridone magenta out on the palette again. I think some other colors, just when I tried those, they were really appropriate for projects I was working on. I will maybe, I don't really have too much in the way of Slanishi type stuff. Oh, wait a minute. I've got some I have some creature caster things. Maybe this is a good place or a good type of thing to use with some of those creature caster figures where I'm really looking to do violets and some Slanishi type pink. So that's probably our best bet. I'm thinking pink night haunts, not so much. Pink bone reapers, not so much. Or lavender, whatever you call fuchsia, I don't know, whatever you want to call this. What's in a name? And hopefully I've got one last paper towel here. And then we will have these last. This is our last mix here, last mix of the video. Is this going to hold up the way, I'm going to just touch more of this onto my brush here. Is this going to hold up the way the purple matter did? I'm thinking no. My guess is that the phthalo green is gonna probably overpower it right away. Oh my goodness. Yep. Wow. Didn't take long there. So there's only, of all the colors that we did, really the only one that didn't get just sort of, for lack of a better term, overwhelmed right away was that purple matter. So just I'll keep that in mind. That's probably the one thing that's really gonna just stand out of my mind here for the next several weeks. I think that's gonna be in the memory banks. This is now we're starting to get more of a violet type of a color here. Much more so. And I'm just going to try and get as much of this as I can out here. I'm literally just taking more and more of the magenta, fresh magenta from a palette here and throwing it out, just trying to get some kind of a impact on the phthalo green. But wow, there's only one color that, well, I'm sure, well, maybe the Egyptian, well, I think we've mixed the Egyptian violet with it. Okay, man, that didn't take long. All right, so there is our last color. That's your quinacridone magenta. There's my purple matter. So a big difference here in the intensities. This, as I said, kind of for your more amber type shading on the gold. This almost more of a fiery color there. This one translucent, this one just super translucent, hyper translucent, ultra translucent, whatever you want to say. Man, big old difference there. I'm going to look for my cadmium red deep, and now actually there's not. Oh, check this out. Oh, all right. So yeah, let's make this right. So this is the biggest difference that I see here. That's almost looking like kind of a brownish color there, but see, with the cadmium yellow light there, it's more of a fiery tone. Look at the difference in our pinks there. Again, nearest term I can see is more of a dingy color. That nice and bright. And this is our faux cadmium red. So I hope this is helpful. This is really just the first of many. The next one I'm going to do, oh well, it's going to be something that has more of our blues in it, because I think that will be interesting to see. So yeah, our next one's going to have more blues. And thanks again for supporting this. Support me on Twitch if you're doing that too. I really appreciate this. I sure as heck wouldn't be doing anything like this. There would be no time for it, like zero time. So this is just the first of several of these. And now we've got ourselves some nifty little color libraries that we can sort of access now in future episodes. So thanks again, folks, and I will catch you on the next episode of Color Theory and Oils, working with our blues.